Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 63. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture with the coaches, athletes, iron enthusiasts, and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as coaches and as competitive athletes. I want to thank everyone who has subscribed to the show, who continues to like, share, comment, and support. That support allows us to continue bringing on expert guests and highlight more individuals in the strength game, just like our guest today. Also want to thank our sponsors. Family owned and operated since 1976, Samson Equipment has been specializing in full turnkey weight room build-outs from planning to installation. Based in Las Cruces, New Mexico, Samson provides professional weight room solutions for those looking to lead the way in advancing our strength conditioning profession. Coaches have relied on Samson as their top resource for all their professional weight room solutions because they provide the finest materials and design, product customization, and the most reputable customer service in the business. If you're in the market for elite level strength equipment, weight room renovations, or upgrades, be sure to check out samsonequipment.com to see how Samson has been delivering clients a long-lasting yet affordable product for over 4 decades. I also want to thank our sponsor, Cerberus Strength. If you're in the market for the highest quality strength and conditioning gear and equipment, be sure to check out cerberusstrength.com and use promo code strength_game to save on your next order. And in this week's episode, I am joined by Coach Henry Adelman. Henry joined the Cal Poly staff as an assistant strength conditioning coach at the start of 2022, where he works with the football, men's soccer, women's basketball, wrestling, and throwing programs. Prior to returning to the West Coast, he most recently served as the head football strength coach at Maryville College in Tennessee, after spending time as a volunteer coach at the University of Tennessee and sports performance coach at D1 in Knoxville. Adelman began his career coaching as a head strength coach at Dakota Junior College in North Dakota for a season. From there, he worked at Fresno State University, starting in 2017, first as an intern before being promoted to graduate assistant, and finally moving into a coaching assistant role in 2020. A former linebacker at Willamette University in Oregon, he was a 2-year starter and captain for his final season, receiving all conference honors. Adelman continues to stay active following his competitive career, training like his athletes do in order to demonstrate for them and ensure he's never asking them to do something he can't do himself. I'm excited to have him on the show today. So with all that said, let's get in the game with Coach Henry Adelman. What's going on, everybody? Today, I've got a special guest. I got one of my former intern / GA / coaching assistants back on the West Coast, and he's back on the West Coast, and I've moved away as far away from him as possible. We got Coach Henry Adelman. What's going on, dude?
What's up, Nick? It's good to see you, man. Beautiful over here in the Central Coast right now. It's a gorgeous day out here, bro, and I just feel very blessed to be able to talk to you on a Saturday morning like this, man.
No, I'm glad to have you on, man. This is pretty cool because we are now at 2 schools that are probably very similar, but polar opposite coasts. You're on the beach on the West Coast. I'm at a beach school out on the East Coast, and they're pretty damn similar for sure.
No doubt. There's a lot of similar makeup as far as the school size and the level that we're at and everything right now. And I mean, even down to the colors and everything, honestly, you know.
I know. No, I like it. Hey, but we'll talk about a lot of stuff like with your new position and the roles and everything like that, kind of getting back basically close to your hometown. But let's really start kind of in the beginning. What really first got you initially started in training? What sports did you kind of play growing up, leading into what you're kind of doing currently?
Yeah. So, growing up, like the sports that I played competitively, like everyone plays soccer when they're a little kid and all that stuff. And, but the sports that I played, I like to consider at a high level were football and basketball. And then even then, going into my junior year, I didn't make my basketball team. And so I was just really playing football for the longest, and, was doing really well and having a really good time and working really hard to earn a Division I scholarship. And I had professional aspirations and those types of things. And, I had a really good group of friends that we kind of all had similar aspirations, and we were all kind of pushing each other in that direction. And the friends that I hung out with were all much more naturally gifted. They were, they all passed the eye test. And then there's me, I was like 5'8", 5'9", barely 200 pounds. And that was just because I was eating like crazy and lifting like crazy to try and maintain that size. And, once I realized that, once I saw how many offers those guys were getting, like my close friends, and the camps they were getting invited to, and the letters they were getting, and the schools that they were getting letters from, my best friend, my closest friend growing up, I mean, this guy had 30 plus offers. And, I got, it was super funny. He got an official walk-on visit to UCLA one time, and I did too. And I just was like, oh my gosh, me and my best friend are going to go on an official visit together. This is unbelievable. And we get there, and it's just so funny, man. Cause I mean, you know how this goes better than most with recruiting and everything, but the amount of attention and conversations and everything that he was having versus kind of the attention and conversations that I was having with these coaches and stuff like that, it was eye-opening. And I was like, man, like this is the type of person that is highly sought after within these programs. That's the type of person that will probably play on Sundays. For me, I'm just fortunate enough to even be in the same room. So when I started really realizing those types of things, that I wasn't going to get a Division I scholarship, that I probably wasn't going to have a very good likelihood of making it to the NFL, and especially just based off my size and stature, I wanted to, stay as close to athletics as I could. The community, the camaraderie, the accountability, the discipline, all those things that kind of coincide with team sports, and especially the game of football, being it a team sport. All those things were really important to me, and I knew that I wanted to be around those things, and I knew that I wanted to somehow monetize those things. And I had a strength and conditioning coach in high school. His name was Coach Flowers. And we were the only team at that time. This is like 2010 through 2012 when I was on varsity and working out with the varsity team in high school. And I just noticed that we were never hurt compared to the teams that we were playing. Like no guys ever got any very serious injuries, for the exception of maybe one that I can think of off the top of my head. And then we were just bullying the teams that we were playing, Nick. You know what I'm saying? And all these teams would come out, and some of them would even have better athletes than us a lot of the time. But, and which is surprising because we did have a few very, very talented kids. But at the same time, I just noticed the difference the weight room had with our ability to stay healthy and our ability to play hard and our ability to play hard late in the game. And I just felt like that really resonated with me. I found the importance in it. And I also discovered that, the weight room was kind of that place for me where, all the other stresses of my life, whether it's school, when you're young like that, there's not really real stresses, just the things you perceive as stress, which is like school, girls, your family life back home, and the crap you got to deal with your parents as a 17, 18-year-old and all that stuff. And I just noticed, the weight room was one of those places where I could go and get away from those things. And when I was training, that was a time where I could kind of get away from those outside stresses, those external stresses. And, that is, I think, what drew me the most to this field, is just those days where we would go and train and have fun and lift with our own and not really even have a plan, but just be in that space for, 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And, the conversations we'd have in there, the closeness that we gained through kind of being in there together. And then also just like the adversity that, you bond over as teammates in those situations, when you're actually in a team setting and performing a tough workout or a tough run. Those were things that I knew that I wanted to stay close to. And so when I found out through my high school strength conditioning coach that there are collegiate strength and conditioning coaches, professional strength conditioning coaches at the NFL, NBA, whatever it may be, I was like, that is something I really would like to look at going forward. And then when I got to visiting some Division III colleges, which was a lot more realistic for me at the time to be able to attend and play right away and those types of things. One of them was Willamette University, and Willamette University had a really, really strong exercise science program. And there was also some kids there that were from my area. And so, with all that kind of feeling right and fitting correctly, and my twin brother getting some partial scholarship to Willamette University through soccer as well, and the opportunity for us to both go to that school and both earn an exercise science degree. I'm really glad looking back on the way everything kind of filtered out and that we went to that school and got our degree in XI, because that just kind of, domino effect for everything going forward. But I think I knew I wanted to coach that was an extremely long answer to your question, but I knew I wanted to coach when I realized that athletics was something that is a part of my life, but that I wouldn't be able to compete at a high level any longer after I got done with high school. And so I wanted to, what is my avenue? How can I stay close to it? This is something that means the world to me. This is something that's kind of guided my life thus far. How can I stay with it? And I found that strength conditioning coaching was the way that I could stay close to it,
Yeah, that's cool. I think that's a good way to kind of like put a bow on it and figure out exactly a different avenue to still stay in athletics, still stay in that area that kind of provided you all the things like you talked about: camaraderie, community, like the discipline, like attention to detail, all those things that you really valued as an athlete and as part of a team. Like, you realize kind of what your shortcomings were going to be, or you kind of were a little bit realistic and projected that, hey, it's not going to be NFL. It's not going to extend past these 4 years. I can make these 4 years important, but hey, if I go to this Division III school, which is realistic to me, at the same time, taking this exercise science program will set me up to continue to be in a field or a shared kind of space like strength and conditioning is, that's so closely attached to athletics. So no, props to you. And obviously, like, that's why I like talking to some of my younger coaching assistants and interns and GAs, because when I was first coming up, I had no idea that strength and conditioning was like a resource. Our high school, I went to two different ones. Our weight, like lifting class or physical education, was just whatever guy enjoyed doing it. I'm not super old to the point where it's just the football guy yelling and with the really high shorts and the high socks, but it was not too far away from that. And unless you were playing a sport that really demanded it, it was not an avenue, and no one knew that there was a career. So it's cool to see now that more, even younger and younger, like year before, like first year of high school, people see that it is a career. Like, it'd be cool to see if like high school and middle school or whatever grades you bring your parents like a career day in, like to see if anybody actually is starting to bring, oh, my mom or dad is a collegiate strength coach, which will be really kind of like that finally like turnaround moment where things are starting to sink in, and that's actually a viable option. But no, I liked how you said it. Obviously, I know your career path before, but hearing a little bit more about like how you and your twin went about that process is awesome. So what after your playing career, like, really got you started? Because your first job in strength conditioning, you were a head coach, and and from there you kind of took a step back and built back up the ladder. So in that time, like one, how did you get to that area of North Dakota? And then what was your decision making process and taking a step back and starting over from scratch after being ahead?
Man, me being a head strength coach was so much fun coming right out of college. Cause ignorance is bliss, right? Like I was so bad, man. I remember getting to Fresno and Bobby Thomas and Ward and those guys, even Alex Jones. They were like, "Can we see a program that you wrote when you were at Dakota College at Botno?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course, man." Like, felt really sure of myself, super confident. I show it to them, and like all of them smirked. Like none of them were disrespectful enough to like just bust out laughing or anything like that, But it's that office with you, Bobby and Natalia at the time, and I walked in there with my program and showed Bobby, and he's like, this is not bad. You know what I mean? But that's, when we had a first real conversation, I just knew at that time, like, man, I made the right decision by taking that step back. But anyways, backtracking slightly, I got into strength conditioning actually while I was playing at Willamette. So Cullen Carroll, who is now the head sport performance football director at Stanford, he and I played football together at Willamette University. Cullen and I were very similar with our aspirations. He was a senior when I was a freshman, so he was well on his way and kind of had his foot in the door already. And he was gonna, when he graduated, he was going to intern at Wake Forest, I believe was his first spot. And I just remember talking to him as a young buck and just being like, Cullen, this is something I want to do. I've heard kind of the opportunity you've been provided. What is the path you've taken? What are the steps you've taken to kind of ensure that you've gotten to this role now? And he had actually been interning at a private sector spot in Salem, Oregon. And it was a sweet deal because we would stay in the summers and we would train. And because I was interning at a training facility, I was able to work there or work out there, I should say, for free and get my training in, through this very legitimate coach. And I really did going into my junior year when I interned there, and then going into my senior year when I trained there and actually had gotten a job there the following summer. That's like really opened my eyes to what proper athletic preseason training should look like. And we had a ton of, nutritional guidance from that coach. And I should give them some credit too. His name is Aaron Haig. He's still out in Oregon. The place that he and I worked at the time is called the Performance Courthouse. And he has his own place now. And we just haven't spoken in a while. I don't remember exactly what the name of the place is called, to be honest, but he's still getting athletes right over in that area. And, that he was a really intelligent coach. And that was one of the things that really opened my eyes to what athletic training should look like. Because before, it was just kind of focused on weightlifting, bigger, faster, stronger, right? But, introducing low level versus high level plyometrics, extensive versus intensive work, introducing, spinal neutrality and how that affects or mitigates the likelihood of soft tissue injury, postural restoration, breathing, and there's actually kind of learning like actual linear programming, movement efficiency, injury prevention. He was the one that kind of really opened my eyes to a lot of those concepts that we use now, and so taking those, an internship one summer and then getting hired on as an actual coach at that same place the following summer, I did have some confidence and some positive feedback that I was doing a pretty good job in this field. And then so getting out of my undergrad, I would have some conversations with close friends and family. And I knew that getting into the collegiate setting, and especially after talking to Cullen too, who was my closest resource at the time, I just understood that those positions aren't paid, and I thought I was above all that, Nick. I thought I was too good to go into something and not get compensated for my time. And so funny enough, this position at Dakota College at Bottineau in North Dakota, which is in a town called Bottineau, it's literally just south of the border of Canada. Like there was one time that I was in Dakota College at Bottineau, and I was just on one side of the line. I had my foot on one side of the line in Canada, and I had my foot on one side of the line in the United States. You know what I mean? Like it was that close. It was super fun. And I was, even though it paid very, very minimal, it did pay. And I was going to be a linebackers coach, and I was going to be their head strength conditioning coach. And then later on, I got hired on as an assistant women's basketball coach there. And I got hired on as like a security guard at nighttime. And so I was doing all these ragtag jobs. I was getting paid. I was loving life. And then, I would continue to talk to Colin Carroll, who was my biggest resource at that time. And he was just kind of saying, if you're already where you're at there and not getting paid very much, is there an opportunity for you to kind of continue to grow? If you're already the head strength coach and you're getting paid X amount, is there room for you to increase what that role looks like and the value of that role? And so that was a question I went and asked one of my bosses at the time. And they said, potentially, I've been getting paid the same for X amount of years. And I would have a similar conversation with most people there. And so what happened when I realized like, oh shoot, this is not really a place for me that I can kind of work into and grow and continue to learn. So part of that was like, I didn't love North Dakota. I knew that I was not doing the best thing for my athletes. I was only doing what I knew how to do. And I was trying to teach myself and look into things and, but you don't know what you don't know. And I was trying to pick Colin Carroll's brain all the time. And, I felt bad because I was constantly in his ear about that kind of stuff. And what he presented to me and what I ultimately found to be the best decision was maybe you should move back and start out at a Division I, have your foot in the door. I had saved up at Dakota College at Bottineau to where I could go out for 4 to 6 months and be able to live on my own in an area like Fresno, right? So I had just gotten an internship at Cal Berkeley. I was going to be working with Brett Huth, who is now at Incarnate Word. And I was like looking for housing there, and my parents were going to help me pay for housing there and all that stuff. And Cullen calls me and says, hey, my close coaching companion, Andy Ward, is going to be the head strength conditioning coach at Fresno. He is looking for interns. You have to do it. And I was like, Cullen, I already told Coach Huth over at Cal that I'm going to go to Berkeley and be with them. That starts in like 2 weeks. And he's like, no, trust me, this is a no-brainer. You'll get to Fresno, which is a smaller spot than Cal. You'll get immediate coaching reps and immediate coaching experience under a guy that I vouch for very, very heavily. And so I called the Cal guy, let them know. They were extremely upset because I was totally lowballing them and getting out of the situation, before 2 weeks of having to arrive there. And so they were going to maybe, be an intern short or going to have to play it really, really fast to try and get somebody else in. So I totally screwed them over, man. But I get to Fresno, and I mean, it was just really tough at some points, right? I went in thinking I knew a lot, and I think relatively I did, because I did have that prior experience. But I was confident and I believed in myself with who I was as a coach and who I was as a public speaker and how I could build a rapport with my athletes, through just being genuine. But I just understood after being at Fresno for that short while that it just wasn't enough. What I was doing at Dakota College at Botno was not nearly enough. And I just learned so much at Fresno. It was extremely eye-opening to be able to go there. And I mean, what I learned at Fresno under you, under Ward, Bobby, Perez, Johnny, Jones, I mean, everybody there just allowed me to set up for these next positions as I've gone down. And now at Cal Poly, just, I mean, those things really prepared me. If I had never experienced those things, if I had just gone, let's say, to Dakota College at Botno, and then somehow ended up at Maryville College, which is another Division III out in Tennessee, that was the position I had here before Cal Poly. Oh my gosh, man. I just don't think I would have done those kids justice at all, you know? And so I'm so fortunate to be able to have had that experience at Fresno. And I mean, yeah, man, it's just crazy. It's crazy to think about. It's crazy to reminisce on and, you know, just kind of look back and see how young and arrogant I was, you know, how much I thought I knew versus how little I actually knew. You know what I mean?
No, I know exactly what you mean. Obviously, like when you first start out, you really don't know what you don't know. And there's so much information in this profession. There's so many different ways to kind of skin the cat.
Right.
Every school is different. Every sport is different. Every region, conference, all that stuff is different. That's really like where the art of coaching comes in. And I think collecting all those experience, building a resource and database of people like you had with Cullen, and then all the other people you were kind of collecting along the way from Fresno, now with like Truitt and Jones and Ward and Perez, all in different places, where now you kind of have a Rolodex of people that you can call upon as you start to advance within your career. And those people you can rely upon. And the best part about it is they're doing the exact same thing with their career. They're trying to advance. They're pretty open-minded about everything. So now when you go into that conversation, you've got a lot more information and you can sit down and have a conversation. Unlike probably what happened your first year coming back, like coming to Fresno as an intern, like, hey, this is what I know. It's like, great, throw that away. This is what we want you to know. And,
Right.
and that is definitely a big check to someone's ego to go from, hey, what do you mean? My first year, I was a head coach. You guys realize that, right? It's like none of you else in the room can say head coach. Like me, Bobby, Perez, like Perez at high school, but
Right.
like other than that, like we weren't head coaches anywhere. And you can say that, but that like setting and that environment is vastly different. So I remember trying to teach the different process of how we kind of went through things, and having you kind of get up to speed on what we're doing, because we knew the potential if you were able to keep up it up. And I think you said it pretty well. And I hadn't thought about this too. It is kind of nice when you go to a place and you start in the beginning, and you like, if it's set up like a good department, you're able to advance the people within your department. You went from intern to GA to coaching assistant, and that really shows, you're right, that does find a way to kind of validate your work and your effort and your ability. And most people aren't able to do that if you don't have kind of a hierarchy system set in place or any career advancement. So I think besides that, you made a good decision going to a place, and Cullen helped you along the way to say, hey, this place has more potential for you. Yes, Cal is probably great and you can learn a ton of stuff there, but it's got a ceiling to it. If you can go to a place where you can get to a ceiling, bust through it, get a new job, new roles and responsibilities, and continue to further develop your career, as if you can make that as a fast track as possible and really take all that information in and build your experience quickly, then you set yourself up for success, because you're ahead of the game when someone calls you for like a full-time job. So that I think you made like a very good decision with that, a hard one, but that's kind of the business where you need to make a decision for yourself.
No doubt. And it's one of those things too, where like when I was at Dakota College at Botno, I was comfortable every single day. There was nothing there. There was no challenge there. Like no one was challenging my thoughts. No one was kind of telling me that I could be doing things differently. I was hired into that role. I mean, yeah, I interviewed well and I showed that I know what I'm talking about for the most part, but there was no one there really pushing me or saying anything different to try and stress me out or make me uncomfortable. When I was at Fresno, Nick, probably any intern feels this way. And I was probably more confident and had more reps than most interns going into their first role at that point. But I just remember at Fresno, from the first day I stepped on there was a level of uncomfortability that I was like, damn, I really don't know a damn thing. You know what I'm saying? And it sucked at first, honestly, because you do question yourself and you start to kind of like, am I good at this? Like, am I a good coach? Do I know what I'm doing? Have I helped my athletes? Do I know anything about injury prevention and nutrition and those types of things? And I did, I knew enough, but at the same time, that uncomfortability has led to so much growth. And it's led to growth to the point now to where when there are uncomfortable situations, it doesn't feel nearly as stressful or as angst filled when you are approached with that adversity in your workplace. Now it's like, and if I never, like I said before, if I never had that experience at Fresno as an intern working under you guys, I mean, Nick, there were some days like I love you to death, bro, but there were some days I was like, I want to hit that guy. I seriously want to hit this guy. Like you, Bobby, even Jones. Some days, man, I was like, I want to square up with these dudes. Like the way they talk to me and the way that I, and you guys were reasonable. Like you guys were good dudes. You know what I'm saying? But I didn't know different. So like I thought that kind of the constant questioning or challenging my thoughts was just you guys having like a lack of belief in me or you guys trying to pick on me or those types of things. But I mean, really, it was just you guys trying to get me to see what I wasn't seeing, and it was you guys trying to help me along, and I just look back and I go, as an athlete, you're challenged by your coaches constantly, but you don't ever look at it as disrespectful or as like, man, coach won't get off my ass, because you know that it's for your betterment as an athlete. But then when you get into the workforce, you don't look at it really the same way until you do kind of gain some maturity, some growth, some perspective. And then you can look back on it and go, Nick, Bobby, Ward, those guys weren't different than like my football coaches growing up. They were just kind of trying to punk me into really understanding how little I did know and how much more I can really open this thing up, And so, like I said, man, like it's definitely some tough times, and you know how it is. Like you've gone through that whole evolution, And so there's definitely some days where you call home, you call your girl, and you're like, I don't know if this is for me. These guys, don't believe in me. They challenge me. They question me all the time. And then it starts to make you question yourself. You know what I mean? But then that one breakthrough, that one kid that you help, that one time where you or Ward or Bobby or Perez or whoever were like, hey, man, you're doing a really good job. Thank you for all your help. Like, those little victories just built up and built up and built up. And then once I got the GA spot, I was like, okay, I'm doing a really good job. That was like the first time that I had gotten like some real feedback when I'd gotten promoted. And I was like, okay, so I am doing a really good job. This is good. I've been putting in a ton of hours. I just didn't know if I was actually like doing all the things the right way necessarily, And then when I got promoted after that into a coaching assistant, I was like, okay, like this is some huge vindication, some huge validation with all the time and effort that I've been putting into this thing. And I would have never had that if it wasn't for taking a step back, starting to the bottom, and then having to work my way up. And, as far as lessons learned and information that we can pass along and how this is valuable to others, I mean, you always want to be proud of yourself. You always want to believe in yourself as a young coach. There's going to be times where coaches question you. There's going to be times where coaches challenge you, maybe in a snarky, sarcastic way. You know what I'm saying? Stuff that'll kind of make you feel lesser. But at the end of the day, it's all love, and they're always just trying to help you along, even if it is kind of like the most, kind of cruel, disrespectful way to go about it. They truly know that they're just trying to get you to see the picture clearly, and yeah, man, I can't express, really how much that did for my career going forward. And I mean, as I'm talking to you now, Nick, like I do want to just take the chance to say thank you, bro. Cause like looking back on those things, I was like, dang, like this sucks. And I look back on it now and go, yeah, it sucked, but you would not be who you are or where you are without those, and yeah, man, I mean, it's crazy to think about. It really is. It's really crazy to reminisce on what you perceived as stressful and what you perceived as difficult and how it's actually allowed you to push onward and upward,
No, that's awesome. No, I appreciate it. I mean, you were a great coach, like starting off, and yeah, you had a lot of potential, and I mean, every single person was looking for Hank, making sure that you came along. We need everybody utilized you from everything. So no, it was awesome to be able to somehow retain you and somehow for Ward and Johnny and everybody to finagle keeping you along and promote you in some sort of ways. Cause we knew there was a special like place for you to be, and like that you still had more things that you could learn. So it's awesome. And I appreciate it, but you're right. And I think that made me think of a lot of stuff. Cause I think myself included, I think strength coaches, a lot of times, if we don't have the ability to kind of validate someone, and in probably one of the best ways you really can feel like it from an intern's point of view, or like just in this day and age, and that's to like pay you or promote you to a greater role, or because you can give people more responsibilities and roles, and yeah, that's great, but it's sometimes you'll sit back and if you think about it, it's like, oh, it's more work. It was like, yes, because we trust you. I know myself specifically, and other strength coaches do the same thing. We don't do a great job of really giving positive feedback or feedback of much soever. It's like, well, congrats, like you did it. Like, what do you want, a cookie? It's like it's like you did your job, like well done. That's why we hired you. Otherwise you wouldn't be here. So it is nice to be able to give someone that, and like it's definitely something I got to do a better job of, like kind of checking in and making sure, especially in this day age too, with everything going on and people talking about mental health a lot more with athletes, like as coaches, that's something that's super important, especially with interns that don't have like 10 years of experience in coaching, or actually more. I don't even know at this point. But to really be able to like detach and take a look back at like where I was when I first started, like what I went through, what those coaches were thinking when I was in their shoes and I had a boss that was saying this, like what would I want my mentor to say to me in this moment? And that's it's kind of hard, especially in such a fast-paced world like strength conditioning is, where our main job is to make sure the athletes are taken care of. Sometimes I don't give two fucks how an intern feels. So it's definitely a different thing, but I think you took it the right way. And I think the real big difference between like what you said with some of the coaches you've had in the past is they're almost preparing you just to follow directions, rather than when a good coach is bringing you on, or mentors, they're teaching you and preparing you to lead and do things independently.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, that's one thing too, is like, I thought going into that initial role that I was kind of a good leader, you know what I'm saying? And that I always knew what to say. But I mean, you get those, they hold you back and they say, not yet, not yet. You haven't earned that rep yet. You haven't earned that rep yet. You haven't earned the right to kind of lead. And then when you do earn that right, you're that much better prepared because of the reps that you've been able to attain and watch through guys that have been doing it at a high level for a long time. And, that's one thing with my few interns now that I try and provide is the opportunity for them to coach, the opportunity for them to be able to lead like an injured group and be able to kind of gain some repetitions through those types of things. Cause I mean, especially at this smaller setting, being at Cal Poly, and I don't know if it's maybe similar for you over at JSU, but like,
don't say that. You got to say JU.
Sorry, JU. Sorry, my bad. But you get to allow those kids more opportunities. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, it's when I was at the University of Tennessee, for example, I was cleaning up, setting up, videotaping drills. I would get to coach injured guys once in a while, if the full-time guys weren't too busy, type of thing. So I'm actually a huge advocate of trying to bring on people at these smaller institutions to try and really get them reps, learn by doing, and reps in the fire. So they can be better prepared for those repetitions later on,
No, that's a great point. And that's, I'm kind of biased because myself, like playing at a D3 school and starting my career off at a D3 school too, like I got thrown into that with some GAs that were like a year ahead of me that were kind of mentors, or before I started doing much more than my internship. Like I learned by assisting them, and they learned by doing the same thing the year before. And it was just kind of, it was passed down a little bit. And really you wore so many hats doing everything, and you got reps coaching, you got reps communicating with athletes, talking to them, making changes on the fly, doing all the other stuff that you would do at a big school. And I mean, who knows what your experience would have been different at Cal Berkeley, and nothing against that, but you do, like when you get to some small schools that are like Cal Poly or Jacksonville, where your staffing is not the same as a Power 5 school, or you don't have the full 5 for football, for sure.
Right.
I mean, you're the one-man show for football right now. So when you go there in an intern, coaching assistant, some sort of like mentee capacity, you're gonna get reps. And that stuff is application that most people do not get at a bigger place, or do not get when all you do is you go right from your undergrad right to a first internship. And you could see that, and it's pretty evident with the same thing with your intern class or the coaching assistant GA class that you've been at, or even now with the interns that you have. You can see the difference between someone who has true confidence because they've coached or they've trained themselves, they built themselves up, and they've got those reps, and it goes to show in the relationships and how quickly they can build those with athletes and feel comfortable on the floor.
Right. No, I mean, for sure. That's one thing too, with like I was alluding to earlier, kind of the smaller setting. I really think, and again, if we're trying to kind of deliver messages to listeners and things like that, younger coaches, try looking at smaller institutions first. It seems awesome to go to these grandiose spots, and as far as a resume goes, it's good to have that on your resume. Like I was an intern I used Tennessee because I was an intern at Tennessee after my time at Fresno, right? So it looks good on your resume, especially with your initial internship, to say that, okay, I was an intern at Tennessee, right? But there's not nearly as much to gain from that. Whereas if you're an intern at Cal Poly, or you're an intern at, really any other FCS or kind of lower mid-major D1, you're going to gain a lot more experience through that. And your references from that are going to be that much better as well. So if that's on your that's on your resume, right? And you're going for that next role and they're looking for people to reach out to. Let's say you are at the University of Tennessee and the people call your intern coordinator. You're going to be one of like 10 interns that they had. It's kind of on you to build a relationship with that coach. And they're not certainly going to try and get to you at all, right? But if you're at a smaller school and it's just you and maybe a couple interns, you and one intern, right? And you have your coach, that coach is going to know you very, very well. They're going to know the kind of the ins and outs and the way you operate. And then from there, when you are looking for that GA or that full-time position and they're reaching out to your references, that reference is going to be so much stronger and so much more confident and believable with the things they have to say about you as a person, as a worker. So, again, for young coaches getting started, look at the smaller spots. Look at the spots where you can make the immediate impact, the immediate repetitions. And then you can work into those bigger kind of fluffy, grandiose institutions from there,
No, for sure. Diversifying like your experience and understanding what those differences are. For you, like you private sector, JUCO, D3, like FCS, FBS, like even on the Olympic side for both of those too, you've been able to see a lot more of what different places have to offer. Just kind of like we said, like conferences are different, regions are different. There's a lot of those things that now are experience that you can put in your tool belt when you get to like be the head for football at Cal Poly and you have other teams you have to assist. You're prepared for those things. Like you're more resourceful, you're creative, like you can deal with any team that gets thrown at you and you can really do more with less. And that's one of the big things I look for people in like that, because you said it yourself, 10 people at Tennessee and like as many like Stanford does it the same way. You're vying for a recommendation. You're vying for not only the 10 people that are there currently, maybe for a job that opens up, but the 10 from the semester before, the semester before, the semester before.
Yeah.
So what did you really do to stand out? Or can you go somewhere smaller and really get some reps on the floor and really like kind of hone it in? I think both are completely useful and they're very viable to have in your experience, but to have one without the other, I think you're missing a piece of the puzzle if you haven't really narrowed down what your career path you want it to be. So
for sure.
Kind of,
and I think along with that too, it's making me think, a lot of the stuff and a lot of the confidence that I gained as a young coach was through that private sector work. Right. And so I don't think, private sector to collegiate sector, it gets kind of a bad rap. Right. But for young coaches, having some private sector experience, again, that's just coaching reps. And a lot of the time, when I was an intern at the University of Tennessee, I was working in the private sector side by side, right? So getting to earn a check and gain some really valuable reps, working with all sorts of age groups and different types of athletes during my time at D1 in Knoxville, while working and having my foot in the door at this collegiate, this big grandiose setting at the University of Tennessee, and kind of getting to work with, some guys that'll play on Sundays and those types of things, like doing those things simultaneously. If your intern coordinator or if the place that you're going to will allow that, can really, really be beneficial. It's tough because it's not as beneficial to maybe the intern coordinator. Ideally they would like you there for the entire day, right? So you can kind of learn the ins and outs of what it means to work a long day, like you're going to have to as a full-time strength coach in the collegiate setting. But a lot of reasonable strength coaches at this level will also understand that you got to pay for a way to live and a way to eat and those types of things as a young coach. Allowing them a few hours to be a personal trainer or do some online programming or, work a fitness app or whatever it is. I think as a young coach doing both those things whether simultaneously or in close proximity to each other, can play huge dividends with your ability to coach and the confidence with which you coach as you go down the road, you know. And I know that's maybe not the most popular opinion. I know that's very biased. That's kind of the exact route that I've went before the last couple stints that got me here at Cal Poly. That being said, I really think that there were so many things that I took from each and every one of those different facets of kind of the journey that I've had to this point, that I don't really see myself getting here without those little pieces that I gained from each one of those different opportunities, whether it was private or collegiate, you know? So I don't know, man. I really think as a young coach, like some private sector could be good. You got to get your foot in the collegiate realm if that's what you want to do, right? But as far as repetition, that private sector option could be a viable for sure.
No, I think it's definitely a viable option. And I don't look down on it when I look to hire people or bring people in, or I see other people's resumes, because just like you said, to your point, it's a lot of coaching reps. You're working with very different demographics. It's a different setting. Those are all valuable things when you actually get to the collegiate setting. And some of those things are more controllable. Like, hey, this is your team. This is what happens. Like now, the same as being at a small school and you go to a big school where you have more toys to play with. It's like, and now like space doesn't matter. Like you can get the whole team at one time. Those small school settings, that private sector setting where you're dealing with all those different variables, kids going to different practices. Now you get to a place that is more honed in, and now you can actually coach and you can show some variations and stuff because you've already kind of gone through the grunt work and all the grinder of the crazy part of it. And I mean, what you said is very similar to what your path was, because you split the door between collegiate and private. And I remember we had the discussion, you were leaving, and I was like, do not let that go off your resume. If you want to be in the college side, like, and they're going to let you do that, keep doing that, because as soon as you get away from it, it's a lot harder to try to return. And that's for your case and some other people's case where you already had so much experience in the college side. I would say, hey, do that. I wouldn't necessarily, we've had an intern that's done it here, kind of splits time between getting paid in the afternoons and coming in the mornings. And for him, like, I know he's got to pay the bills, but if he takes a full-time job, does he know what it entails? Like, yeah, sure, he's coached, but college going there all day for a certain amount of time, like, it's very different. You've already had that in your back pocket to draw upon. So for most people, I would say, you need to figure out what it actually looks like to go through the grinder on some of those rough days in college and be like, is this for me or not? And before you start splitting the gap, and everybody's got to put a dent in their student loans and shit like that. But make sure you're not half-assing everything forever. If it's something that one of those avenues is what you really want to whole ass and like be your aspiration for a career down the line.
No doubt. And I definitely see, you know, after living through it, I've definitely seen you know, the benefit from kind of doing both simultaneously, private, collegiate. But like you said, you definitely do need, and I think the best way to go about it, Nick, would be you get done with your undergrad, you're working towards your certifications, and while you're working towards your certs, you are a full-time collegiate intern, if that's what the direction that you want to take, right? So you're working towards your cert, you're a full-time collegiate intern, and you're not sleeping much. You know, you're doing everything you can to try and get to that next spot, right? And then maybe your second internship, let's say, if that what ends up happening, that is where you can kind of go, okay, well, I've understood now what this entails, the amount of time that this actually takes to put out a really high quality product, and the amount of hours and kind of attention to detail that this whole thing really requires. And then you can kind of go, okay, well, I have an understanding of that. going into my, let's say, second internship, maybe it's my second internship that I go one and the other. You know what I mean? I don't know exactly how that would work out. I don't think there's a perfect system, which is why it's so tough for people to kind of advance in our field, especially initially. But if there was like a paved road to get there, I would argue to say that you start off doing the grunt work, not getting paid, putting in all the hours with one person, with one team, with one place. And then as you kind of work from there, you can kind of go, okay, it's either a GA next, or it's a second internship along with a private sector job. And that could maybe lead into your GA. And then that goes to the next thing, So, it's tough because there's not a perfect road. And I mean, every one of us had to figure out our own path. Like nobody really has the exact same path that they've taken to get to this point. And I think that's why these conversations are so interesting, and why listening to these conversations is so interesting, because you really get to find out, like, dang, that's the path they took versus that's the path so-and-so took. Like, I could never imagine doing that or having to do that. You know what I mean? Just like maybe some people will hear this and go, dang, so that guy was a head strength coach, intern, GA, part-time coach, back to an intern, working private sector while he was interning, back to a head strength coach, and then back to a legitimate Division I. You know what I mean? Like, people will hear that and probably go, how did he not get out earlier? Or how did he even like kind of navigate through that? You know what I mean? And so I just think that's the fascinating part about it. You know what I mean? And there's like, I don't know. I'm thinking now, like, what is kind of the best way? And the answer is there just really isn't one. There really isn't one. It's kind of just based off your individual status and how much can your parents help support you when you initially start off and those types of things. And I mean, man, there's just so many variables that go into it. And I think that's why it's the most kind of fascinating aspect of our field, is kind of your journey. How did you get to where you are now? Who is it that you met and coached with and those types of things that make you into the person you are now with the philosophy behind coaching and training that you have now, And that's why it's awesome to get on the horn with you and be able to talk about this stuff in kind of more of a public forum setting, so people can hear that and go, man, I'm struggling through my internship, or, there's another full-time coach listening to it that'll go, man, I really respect and appreciate the path so-and-so had to take to get to where he is now. You know what I mean? Yeah, man, I just think it's really interesting. And I wish there was like a perfect method that I could kind of advise on for young coaches, but I mean, I just feel like it's kind of all in the stars. It's just all individual,
I mean, yeah, your path is your own. And
right.
I think everybody is going to be a sum of the decisions they make and a sum of all the experiences they're able to kind of collect and learn across that whole path that they choose to take. And yeah, I don't think there's any set one that's going to be better than the other, because everybody's goals in this profession are different. I think we all have similar objectives of what we want to accomplish, like training our teams or what we want to get out of the X's and O's and the relationships we build in the weight room. But everybody has a different interpretation and idea of the set and setting that they want to be in to get those objectives accomplished. And that's why, yeah, you're right. It is pretty cool to see and talk to more people whose maybe you don't understand their full story. Like, you can read their bio and say, hey, they've been here, here, and here, but that really doesn't tell the whole story, because there's a lot of intricacies that happen between the time and like your reasoning to go to Tennessee, your reasoning to come back, like that stuff. You don't put that on a timeline chart or anything. And we're looking at people too. It's why I think it's hard to like truly define success or understand why people get hired and fired in this profession, because just like there's no set ideal path of how to get to like your position where you are or my position where I am, for anybody that's trying to listen and kind of replicate it. Like a lot of what we do is a gut feeling. Like does the resume pass the eye test? Like does the coach like pass the eye test? Like I can't describe it. It's a feeling. Like
Right.
those things are very difficult to do, but I do agree, like getting the grunt work in the very beginning and paying your dues and
Yes.
really understanding two things. Do I want to be in this profession? And can I fucking do it?
Right.
And after your first year or two or your first two internships, if you can't answer those questions confidently and like equivocally, like this is what I want to do, like I can do this, financially, like mentally, physically, then it's probably a good thing you only did internships and you didn't waste a lot of money, and you should probably pick something else.
Yes, exactly. Right. No, exactly. I think that's one thing too, man, is like we as coaches, former athletes, the majority of us at this point, I would really say almost every strength coach was a former athlete. I can't think of anybody that wasn't, but there's a certain toughness that you want to kind of project as a young coach. And, another message that I would kind of tell other coaches is don't let you trying to act tough or be tough make it so that you're not looking for other avenues if that's something that you want and you're not happy in strength conditioning. You know what I mean? Don't make it seem like, oh, I just got weeded out or whatever the case is. Because at the end of the day, the biggest thing is your happiness, right? So if you're not happy, even though it's going to be perceived as less tough, or he couldn't make it, or he didn't have the chops, or whatever the case is, man, fuck all that. Like the biggest thing is, are you happy with the way you live life now? And I have a lot of friends, Nick, and I'm sure you do too, that don't like their jobs, but they work for the sake of work because they want to have a life. They want to have the life that they have. So like the important things to them, the priorities to them are their life outside of work, right? Which is fine. And I respect the heck out of it. You know what I'm saying? That being said, don't ever as a young coach try and pigeonhole yourself into this one thing, especially if you're not happy, just because of the image of it or just because of the perceived, the perception that the coaches that you're working under will have of you or whatever. You know what I mean? And that took me some learning too. As far as like, I don't want, Ward or Nick or these guys at Tennessee to see me as lesser or not tough or that I can't make it or whatever. I'm going to be competitive and chip away because of that. I used to be that way because that's the athlete mindset that I had, right? Nah, hell no. No one's going to dog me. They're not going to bitch me. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm going to push. I'm going to show them. And I think I did accomplish that. But at the same time, doing it that way, in some regards was really fun. Some people aren't wired that way. And if it's not a good time for you or you're truly not happy, then you're not cut out. You know what I'm saying? And that's okay. That's the bottom line is it's fine. You know what I mean? The reason I bring this up is because as I've gone through this thing, there's coaches that you and I have worked with at a full-time capacity, intern capacity, GA capacity that aren't doing this field any longer. And there were some damn good coaches too that aren't doing this field any longer. You know what I mean? One that comes immediately to mind is my boy, Alex Jones. He's still coaching, right? But his life outside of coaching, as he's now gotten a daughter and a wife, like those things to him are his number one priority. That's what makes him happy. That is kind of where his priorities lie. That's where his life is geared towards. You know what I'm saying? So the fact that he was able to kind of take a step back and go, you know what, this is what drives me. This is what's pushing my life in the positive direction that I want to take it to. Like, I'm just so happy that he's happy, because I love that guy. He's a good friend. You know what I'm saying? And that's how it should be for a lot of the other coaches in our field. You know, we should never be trying to push through things just because we're worried about the perception of others. We should always just trying to be looking towards, you know, what floats your boat, right? And if you're doing that in a selfless way that is bringing others along with you, that's only even better. You know what I'm saying? So, I know I went on a tangent a little bit there, bro, as I tend to do, but
now you're good.
But I think it's an important message to put out there. You know what I mean? Because there's definitely some people that, you know, go through life and they try and do whatever they think their friends and family think they should do instead of what they actually want. You know what I mean?
No, that's a good point. I think that's a good message to put out for people, because I mean, it's similar to kind of logo chasing or taking a position because you like the perception of what that role is going to provide you, rather than how it's going to make you feel or what impact you're going to be able to do in that role. And at the end of the day, like I've done it before, and I know some people have taken it the wrong way, but I really want to be selfish with some of my decisions about what I do in my personal time, like being able to say no more often to athletes or coaches or administration and stuff, because if I'm not happy in my current role, if I'm not happy in what I'm able to do in and out of work, then it has a direct correlation and effect on the athletes that I'm supposed to be helping all the time. And a lot of people do not understand that. And a big thing of that is, if your image of what you portray a strength coach at X school or this sport or this position, this conference, it's tainted in a different way and it doesn't actually make you intrinsically motivated, and it's for outside factors, then you're on a mission to fail. And it's a ticking time bomb that you're doing an injustice to people and your athletes in particular. And you're basically self-sabotaging yourself.
Oh yeah. No, it's almost more selfish to try and go about it that way and push forward because of the perception that you're worried about others seeing you as. Like you said, if you're doing it for those selfish reasons, you're never going to be able to benefit the athletes that you're working with.
Right.
Because it's going to always lead to resentment. You know what I mean? It's always going to lead to like, fuck the kids. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, man, you gotta love this thing. You gotta love this thing. And you gotta love the servant leadership that is accompanied with this position. If you aren't in this thing to fulfill yourself, but through fulfilling yourself, help along and create a high quality product for the school, the sport, and the kids that you're with, then, I mean, it's not for you. You know what I mean?
I hear you. That's a big thing. Obviously, a lot of people exiting the profession, or a lot of people I've spoken to recently, are looking for different avenues to try to find a place that kind of supports that message. So it's definitely a growing kind of issue, and it's a big topic that's, I mean, it's been around forever, but I think it's getting kind of thrown into the limelight a little bit more. So kind of switching gears a little bit, we talked about it a little bit before about how important those like on the floor reps are, especially really young in your career, so that you can kind of develop a coaching voice and learn the ins and outs of cueing and just feeling comfortable and confidence with your athletes and programming. On the same side of it, like being able to practice what you preach a little bit, and like the influence you get from training yourself that actually impacts your ability to coach. For you, like after your competitive career, why is it really important for you to still train and set a good example for your athletes?
No doubt. So for me, and this is something, I mean, I've always had an affinity for fitness and for pushing my body and those types of things. I think that those qualities or those characteristics are kind of what drew me to this profession, right? That being said, when I was getting my master's degree at Fresno State during my time as a GA, working in my Department of Education and getting my master's in education, one thing that we would talk about a lot is different types of learning styles, right? And one of those biggest ones is visual learning. And I just remember talking to our professors about it during our lecture, and the literally exact example was that athletes tend to be visual learners, right? And we even went through an exercise where you would tell the athlete, right? Which one of your classmates, you would tell the athlete exactly what they should do, right? So let's say they're bench pressing, and you would tell them exactly how to bench press while not showing them anything, just giving them auditory cues. Here's what you should do. Here's how you set up, go. Or you could say nothing, go under there, show them exactly how to do that. Yeah, you might have to go step by step with your body movement, right? Like one arm at a time, pull my lats under, pull my elbows in, kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're not saying these things, but you're kind of showing the person as you go through the visual slowly. And always, 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 the visual lesson was better comprehended than the auditory lesson. And so for me, I took that and I said, if I can't show these guys how an exercise or how our movement is supposed to be done to its best extent, like in the way that I want them to do it, or the way that it should be done properly to save, mitigate the likelihood of them being injured, or just for the sake of it being proper technique in the weight room, then I can't ever expect them to do it like that. Now, Nick, I understand it's a tough philosophy because, I'm 28 now, I'm still fairly spry, but, like in 10 years, 15 years, I don't think I could physically be able to perform the same way that I do now from an athletic standpoint, right? So I'll have to take a different, and I'll have to adjust my philosophy slightly, or I'll just have to have some really badass coaching assistants or interns or whatever the case is, right? But right now, to me, understanding that efficiency is super important with what we do with NCAA hours. You only get so much time with these kids, and you got to fit a ton of work in the time that you have with them. That being said, you're also in the age of athletes needing to know why they're doing everything. So you need to have enough time for you to explain to the athlete why it's important what they're doing, while showing them exactly what they can do and how it's going to help them on the field. You don't have that time to then say, breaking down a squat, you do this. That's how you squat. You just don't have the time to do that unless you take the time, like let's say in a week 0 during an introduction week or whatever, to be able to do those things, right? So you have to be able to demonstrate, or you need to have somebody on your staff that can demonstrate. Otherwise, there's no shot that the athletes will be performing it in the way that you're expecting it, or the way that's best optimized for their sport translatability or for their safety in the weight room. So for me, selfishly speaking, it's for my own fitness. Selfishly speaking, there's a certain aesthetic or physique that I want to have. That being said, it's important to me to train athletically and incorporate plyometrics into my training, incorporate eccentrics and isometrics and heavy weightlifting, along with sharp change of direction work, along with deceleration and injury preventative work, along with deep knee bend, hip bend, all that different stuff. It's important that I am incorporating those in my training so that I can best show my athletes and most efficiently show my athletes how to perform the movement in their training. Another piece of that too, Nick, as far as practicing what you preach, I naturally am kind of an active guy. I like to hike. I like to swim. I like to, one of my favorite things, and you know this, and during our time at Fresno, I love basketball. I'm short, I'm white, I'm not the best basketball athlete, right? I was not blessed with a bunch of fast twitch muscle fibers. You know, I'm genetically very slow twitch. That being said, having that competitive advantage on the basketball court, because of training the way I train, is also very fun, because people look at you and they go, that dude's not a hooper. You know what I'm saying? But then because you actually do jump in your training, or you change direction in your training, or you lift heavy in your training, and you perform deceleration, injury preventative work in your training, it makes it so you can go out there and actually play and have fun and do well, and not worry about like busting something, you know, busting your ass, bro. You know what I'm saying? While trying to just have some fun out there, you know? So selfishly, I train the way I train because I've told my fiance this too. If you want to look a certain way, you got to train that way. If you want to look like a track and field athlete, damn well, you better train like a track and field athlete. If you want to look like a football player or a baseball player, you better train like a football player or a baseball player. You know what I'm saying? So for me, like my certain physique, my aesthetic, I want to look athletic. So I train athletically, right? And then that also just pays dividends, because when I am talking to my athletes about here's how you perform an exercise, I feel very confident as a coach. And right now, as I've just started here at Cal Poly and being one of the only coaches on my staff during a training session at the time, I need to be the one showing them how to do it and being able to demonstrate. So that's why it's important to me to practice what I preach. Another piece of that too, Nick, is I'm sick of being in programs where the coaches don't hold themselves to the same standards that they're asking their players of. I love that expression. And you know what I mean? So, and I haven't seen this everywhere. And I'm definitely not going to say where I have seen it. I'm not going to, go down that rabbit hole or anything. But there's definitely been situations where coaches will be explaining an exercise on the floor. Maybe they didn't go over that exercise with their staff. They don't feel they can confidently demonstrate it. So then they go, hey, can you do this exercise for me? And this is your first time as a coach on the side, or a young coach, seeing and explaining this exercise as well. And you go, you want me to do this exercise for the group, in front of the group, the way it's supposed to be done, when I don't really know what I'm supposed to do either. You know what I'm saying? So that's the situation I'm running into with my young coaches and interns right now, is I don't really have the time to brief them on the entire training session before we get into it. So it's on me as a coach that has devised the plan to be able to then go perform the plan for the athletes, so they have a better understanding of how to see it and how to do it. Right? Now, when we also talk about standards, I can't sit here as a strength coach and preach nutrition and sleep and a way of living outside of the facilities and then not do those things myself. That's goofy as hell. You know what I'm saying? To say like, hey, you should be eating this type of way, you should be hydrating this type of way, blah, blah, blah. But then the boys see me at work with freaking Twinkies or drinking soda, or, whatever the case is. And I know there's coaches that do those things, man. And they're all really good coaches, and they've kind of found their own ways and philosophies behind how to get the information to their athletes. And I'm not disrespecting or dogging those coaches whatsoever that don't kind of live the same physical disciplinary lifestyle that I'm trying to kind of engage in. But to me, it's important to me as a person, but it's also, to me, the most effective and efficient way to communicate and convey the information to my athletes is to be able to just go out and do the movement, and go out and say that I live the life that I'm trying to get them to live. Because then if they see you setting an example as a coach, they are then going to have that much easier of a time to then go, okay, if Coach Adelman's bum ass can do it, I can do it, right? And I tell my kids that all the time. And I know there's coaches in the past that have gone, if my old ass could do it, so can you, kind of thing. You know what I mean? But I understand now what those guys actually meant. Because if my old, slow, weak ass can do it, you can definitely do it. You're a Division I athlete. If my lazy ass can get up at the same time each morning and have the same foods each day and consume the same amount of hydration each day and sacrifice certain things on the weekends and, live a lifestyle that you don't have to hide or that you can post about on social media and those types of things, like then your athletes will have that much more buy-in behind the training that you're providing them because they believe in you as a person, right? And so I try and show my athletes how much I believe in them as human beings. I treat my athletes in the collegiate setting as men and women, right? They are 18 plus. In my mind, I will show you the same amount of adult respect that you should show me. Okay. I understand respect is earned. And that is just one way that I try and gain their following and gain their respect is through training my body and training my mind the same way I would expect them to, so that there's really no excuse to why they wouldn't be able to do that. I know that was super long-winded. That is something I feel very passionate about. As a coach, there are coaches that I've worked with in the past, or coaches that even that I haven't worked with in the past that I've seen, and they have a harder time conveying those things to their kids, or they rely on their assistants to be able to perform movements or to be able to live their lifestyles the way that they're expecting their kids to live their lifestyles. And then, they themselves kind of do whatever, you know what I mean? So, and like you said, you said it from the very beginning, Nick, there is multiple ways to skin a cat. I am not disregarding or trying to be disrespectful to coaches that have a different philosophy and live a more comfortable lifestyle outside of the stresses and demands of what they're doing at work. There's going to be a place in my life, hopefully not soon, but a decade, 2 decades from now, to where I do need to take a step back and rely on my assistants. But as long as I'm able-bodied and as long as I can successfully be as disciplined with my mind and body as I feel necessary to kind of set an example for my athletes, I will continue to do so.
I love it. Yeah, I know you're pretty passionate about it, and I'll let you ramble on as long as you want, because obviously, like you said, it's part of your coaching and training philosophy. It's something important to you, and I think especially younger in your career, when you're still not too far removed from your athlete's age, and they kind of see you, like some of the older athletes almost see you as like peers. It's super important to really set the standard and live that example, because they're thinking for themselves. It's a lot easier to relate to someone that's maybe a few years removed from college, and they're like, oh, well, this is the type of person I want to be in 3 to 4 years. It's a good mentor. It's I know he's my coach, and he's supposed to tell me this stuff, but what he's telling me, he actually believes in because he's following it. And I think you make a good point too. Obviously, it's not something you can necessarily live for the rest of your life in that manner, and there's going to be ways that things are going to need to change. I do the same. If I have 3 lacrosse groups back to back and I don't get a chance to, if I don't have an intern, that's me demoing 3 things. Or if I have someone that stays after, I'll be like, oh, that kid already did it, I'm going to demo with him. Or my intern, they saw me demo it first. You guys know what it is, be expected to do it in the second session. Because I know I have more important things. It's part of your philosophy, but that there's some wiggle room that what you need to do in order to get the best out of what your program entails. But I think it's super important, like everything you said. And if it's something that you're going to preach to the athletes, it's something that you really are bought into and it's part of your philosophy, then the best way to do it, the same as coaching and showing visual demos, like you're a living, breathing visual demo of what an athlete should be. Like you should be training. If you're training like an athlete, if you're competing in something, whatever it is, do it. Like you can't be the best golf athlete. You can't be the best like football athlete and wrestling athlete and basketball athlete all at the same time. But you can train athletically and you can have the same principles that you're you're trying to convey to them all the time. So no, I love it. I love it. That's awesome. Hey, so hopefully like any good of your training sessions, since you're training like an athlete, sometimes you get stuck in a good old fashioned finisher. So we got 4 quarters, 4 questions.
Crap. All right. I knew this was coming. I've listened to a few episodes and I was like, I gotta be ready for those final questions.
Then you for sure got overtime, but for you, take as long as you need, or we'll go rapid fire. But you ready?
Okay, I'm ready. I'm excited.
All right. I'm going to change this one for you too. Biggest influence in strength and conditioning who you have not worked for?
Who I have not worked for.
Uh-oh. I didn't want you to say anybody I already know. That's why I wanted to see if there was a secret one behind the lines.
There are definitely a few, because I mean, just like anything else, you take tidbits from different coaches in the field. Like the tier system is something that I use very popular. I could say Joe Ken. Triphasic is a concept that we use in our training. I could say Cal Dietz. You know what I'm saying? But I think the one that really opened my mind the most from the very beginning, and these concepts I still use heavily to this day, is a, and I don't even know how to really pronounce his last name. Okay. But it's Pavel Tsatsouline, and he's like the kettlebell guru. And I remember the very first book that I read in my Fresno State internship was called The Naked Warrior. And it was a book that we read on body weight movements, eccentrics and isometrics, and how the key to developing strength is not necessarily load, but it's time under tension and movement efficiency. And so I would say that book was the first book that I read in the field that I was like, holy crap, dude, this just blew my mind. This opened me up to just a completely different philosophy behind training. And that is something that I still heavily utilize with all my kids here and all the kids that I've worked with over the last 6 to 8 years. So I would have to say good old Pablo, man. No doubt.
Yeah, I'm not going to try to say his last name either. So
I hope I didn't completely butcher that. But I think I was close.
Yeah, people will get it. Hey, so what can you be found doing outside of the weight room walls when you're not coaching, you're not training? What are some of your hobbies outside of strength and conditioning?
For sure. I've definitely alluded to them a little bit, but like anything active. So like I love playing basketball. I'm very fortunate where I'm at now in San Luis Obispo has some amazing scenery and hikes. So like on the weekends when I'm not in the office, like on Sundays, I try and stay completely out of the facilities. And that's when I'll go on a lot of really cool scenic walks, hikes, have phone calls with people during those things. The beach is right in my backyard. And even though the Pacific Ocean is cold as fuck, man, I love going to the beach. And, one thing that my fiance and I do. And now that we're doing some long distance right now, I've gotten my little brother to kind of join me. It's just kind of going on like feel good runs is what I call them. And you just kind of put some music in. You try and do it on a beautiful day. You try and do it after you've accomplished everything you needed to accomplish for that day. And you just go for a run, you know, and in my family, Nick, like anxiety has always been kind of an issue. And then we, genetically speaking, have always had kind of like some heart issues in the Adelmans. So going on these cardio type runs is kind of one way that I've changed my training a little bit more since I've known you, because you always would see me lift and sprint and those types of things. But I have tried to do a little more aerobic type stuff as I've gotten back into a more scenic kind of weather friendly area, you know, being in San Luis Obispo. And as I've gotten older, I've also started to kind of realize the importance of that. So anything that's kind of low, long activity, something that's I can have a conversation while doing type of thing, you know?
I like it. Hey, so if you were not in strength conditioning, where do you think your career would be right now? And if you could go pro in any sport, would it have been football or something else?
Man, okay. So if I wasn't a strength conditioning coach, I would definitely want to be like, you know, as a young buck, I was like professional athlete. And that led me to being a strength conditioning coach. That being said, if it was completely outside of this, I think I would honestly probably teach because it's a similar skill set and it's a similar kind of purpose to why you do what you do. And so I think and it's something that, you know, my mom did in as a career. And I think another career that I could see myself in is like beer and wine. So my dad was a winemaker, is a winemaker out here on the Central Coast. And that has always been kind of a really cool, laid back, really scientifically based field that I could see myself really enjoying as well. You know, I just didn't get into it initially because I didn't want dad's handout kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? But I could definitely see myself doing what he does from a business standpoint, and also kind of just the microbiology behind creating alcoholic beverages. Plus, being in that field and kind of just like how laid back that is and how like friendly everyone is because it's the sale of alcohol, you know, it's kind of a cool gig. So I could see myself doing that too.
Strength coach wine.
Hey, might have something.
Might be an open market. So what pro sport would you have picked?
Oh, right. Basketball.
Okay.
Basketball. I mean, I do not have the size or skill set, but as far as what I think I'd be able to do the longest and make the most money with and have the most fun doing, it would definitely be hoops. And I think basketball, and some people might, you know, think this is like blasphemous for me to say this, but I think as a sport, by nature, it's less intense. And I say intense loosely, but it's less intense than football, and it's less physically taxing in a lot of ways than the game of football. Just from the grounded pound that you generally take, right? So I think basketball would be one to where I could exit the game when I'm done and still feel like I was athletically, you know, inclined and can move well and those types of things still.
Yeah, not wheelchair bound. So, hey,
yeah.
You kind of talked about those new feel good runs you're going on, throwing on some music or having a conversation. But if you're setting up a normal Adelman training day in the weight room, what's your go-to training music and what's your best post-training meal look like?
Okay, go-to training music lately kind of consists of my top 5 favorite rappers. I generally will listen to like on my feel good runs, I'll listen to EDM. On my drives, I'll listen to kind of alternative R&B or even some country. But when I'm in the weight room, it's like 50 Cent, Lil Baby, Kendrick Lamar, Rick Ross, and J. Cole, Schoolboy Q, kind of some of those. So it's definitely rap. And I try and blast that as loud as possible. And I try and really like play music with really hard bass and hard beats. Post-training meal, there's a spot in Grover Beach, and it's also in Atascadero, which is like, if we're looking at slow, it's just kind of either direction, north or south. And there's a place called Sylvester's Burgers, and there's one of the burgers called a Heart Attack, and it's like a double cheeseburger with egg and bacon. So I mean, the calories would be super high on that, but the macros, carbs, fats, proteins, I mean, you can't beat it. So I would definitely have to say Sylvester's Burgers, and it's so good. It's so good.
Well, next time I'm out there, I'm going to look for that one, because mine was at one point that Mad Duck Heart Attack burger, or not the burger, but whatever that sub was that one was on point.
No, I know what you're talking about. So it's like that, but like even a little bit like heavier and like more tall with the stack, you know what I'm saying? And it's juicy as heck, man. I love that. I love it.
I like it. All right, so last one I got for you for overtime.
All right.
Either your favorite part or aspect of coaching, or a favorite coaching memory of yours.
I'd have to say favorite coaching memory is it's actually somewhat recent. I just gave, and it's not even really a coaching memory, but it's something that was a big victory for me because I never knew how well I would be able to do at this. Recruiting presentations. We just had a junior day on campus the other day, and I had to give this big, long speech to I think it was like 500 people or something on my philosophy when it comes to football strength conditioning. And as good as a coach and a public speaker you can be in front of your unit, in front of your team, it's always different when there's a bunch of kind of judgmental parents, high school kids, and there's a plethora of them out in the stands. Like that can be an angst-filled situation. And I remember seeing Ward and you and those other guys do a ton of those. And I did a few when I was at Maryville in front of a big group as well. But just recently, this was the biggest one. And honestly, Nick, I thought I did a really good job and I spoke confidently and all that different stuff. And so to me, as far as like getting over a fear or kind of an accomplishment or a victory for kind of me personally in my coaching career, that was kind of one of the big ones. And I know that doesn't amount to how I'm training the athletes or wins and losses or those types of things, but I really felt that day that I did help truly recruit some of those guys into our program. And that's not something you can say as a strength conditioning coach very often. A lot of the times you help recruit, you get the kids, and then you just kind of work with them. I really felt that day that I made a difference in our ability to recruit some of these guys just based off of what I was saying about our program, you know?
No, that's awesome. I think most people don't really get an opportunity to do that, like actually get a chance to bring the right people in. Because I think the majority of the time, strength conditioning is most time an afterthought. But
right.
for sports like football, especially like at the FBS or FCS level as well, that is a huge aspect of training. So for you to be able to go out there and feel confident in what you do and understand that a lot of guys probably took that to heart and may have based their decision whether or not to go to Cal Poly based off of what you said. I think that's awesome. Hey, so for anybody that's got any questions and stuff for you, how can they kind of reach out, follow along, or come out to see you on the West Coast and see what Cal Poly Mustangs are up to?
No doubt. So if anyone ever wants to reach out to me, I think social media is kind of one of those outlets that has proven to kind of be the easiest and most efficient. So my name on Twitter and my name on Instagram is the exact same. It's at Adelman15. It's all lowercase. It's all one word. And Adelman is spelled Adelman. So Adelman15.
Awesome. We'll link all this stuff up. Yeah, we'll link all this stuff up for you. But hey, I can't appreciate you. Like, I can't thank you enough for coming on today. I mean, we've known each other for a while. You've made a lot of progression, like obviously through your career, which you shared kind of today. I'm stoked for you to kind of be in this position, especially back at home for the most part, and really taking charge and doing the stuff you love. And it's awesome to kind of see your career develop over these years. And I appreciate the nice things you said, because you made our job, you made my job a lot more enjoyable and a lot easier from everything and your attitude coming in on those days. So it's cool to see you now kind of get to pass the torch on to other people and bring people under your tutelage a little bit. So I'm stoked for you, man.
That means the world, Nick. And, I just wanted to reiterate that I'm honored to be on this show with you, man. And, I've seen so many of the guys that I've worked under, speak on your show. And, that's been a goal of mine, is to get to a spot to where I can kind of earn that credibility to kind of get on with you. And, when I got this position, I thought it might be it kind of thing. And so when you did reach out to me, I was just fired up, man. And it just, like you said, it kind of just alludes to how far we've come, bro. And just how much you and those others have kind of helped me along this journey. So just thank you so much, brother. I appreciate everything.
You're big time now. You made it.
Let's go.
Awesome, man. I'll talk to you later.
All right, brother. I appreciate you.
Of course.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com, where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.